Welcome back. Well, the B20 Summit was attended by many global leaders to discuss key issues that aim to provide policies and recommendations that can spur economic growth and development. Now, Metro Globe senior journalist Kaniyasu Tisnawinata spoke with UN Assistant Secretary General of the United Nations Global Compact about the B20's key issues that aims to support the G20 goal of recover together, recover stronger.
The B20 Summit taking place in Nusa Dua, Bali this year is highlighting the need for a global business collaboration that is inclusive and more sustainable, as well as greater partnership with the public sector to address global issues in line with the G20 focus this year, which are transforming health system, digital economy, and energy transition in a post-COVID-19 world. And among the speakers to address the B20 Summit delegation is Assistant Secretary General of the United Nations Global Compact and CEO and Executive Director of the UN Global Compact, Sanda Ojiambo, who is here with us and who will talk a little bit more about the importance of the private sector to help address issues of sustainability. Ms. Ojiambo, it's a pleasure to have you with us.
Thank you so much for having me.
And welcome to Bali.
Thank you.
I understand this is your first time here.
This is my first time here. From what I've seen, what a beautiful country and beautiful people.
Oh, thank you so much. Let's go to your keynote address at the B20 Summit. You talked about the urgency to unlock capital from public, private, and also philanthropic sources for climate action and sustainable development goals by promoting, upscaling, and optimizing. You also talked about adopting sustainable and socially responsible policies in business to spur economic growth. So can you throw some more light on how business leaders and the public sector can work together in addressing these issues?
So, through COP, through the climate conference, it was very clear that private sector has a role to play in decarbonizing or greening their emissions. But what was a key discussion point and tied into my keynote here in Bali was about private sector financing.
Okay.
And really the opportunity lies to bring together a blended finance model, which is very much the discussions in B20, which is where public sector financing comes together most innovatively with private sector financing to really raise the trillions of dollars that we need for a lot of the transitions, energy transition, climate transition, and the food transition. I think the fact is economies around the world are really constrained right now. There's inflation, we've come through the pandemic, economies are recovering, but there's a lot of private finance that is available, hundreds of trillions of dollars. If it is combined innovatively with public financing, really we believe that that funding can go towards funding these important climate transitions, providing capital that will go into renewables and scaling renewables. But most importantly, I think for developing and emerging economies, the opportunity for them to access capital in a way that is more equitable and just and accessible will really help them make the transitions to green or protect their economies and their countries as they need to.
Okay. Any recent development that you would like to share at this point about blended financing and how developing countries such as Indonesia can access these capital?
I just have to really thank, there's a lady, Sherry, who has really driven the THK forum and the model of blended finance that Indonesia is putting forward. I think there's been lots of innovation and lots of discussion around that. So great leadership from Indonesia.
Okay. So, but in your view, what are some of the critical challenges that the world is facing in achieving the sustainable development goals? In other words, what keeps you awake at night?
Yeah, well, lots keeps me awake at night, to be very honest, but I'll summarize it by three things. I think in the last 2 or 3 years, the world has been united by a group of global crises that we've never seen before. The COVID pandemic obviously brought us all together. There's the climate crisis that we're all facing right now, and there's conflict. Yeah. So we call them the 3 Cs: COVID, conflict, and climate. And I think around the world, whether you're a developed country, a developing country, or an emerging economy, we are all feeling the brunt of this. What has it meant? Much needed resources that would have gone into sustainable development as a whole have gone towards addressing these 3 areas, and that's okay. But the point is that it's now thrown us off progress on the overall development goals, such as health, education, agriculture, reducing poverty, again, the climate crisis. So we at the UN have always said that the sustainable development goals, the 17 goals, are a framework for recovery through COVID, focusing on the climate crisis, and certainly focusing on conflicts and getting past conflict. So for us, it's really about how to focus again again, on the SDGs as a means of really developing economies and jump-starting growth, job creation, keeping youth engaged and entrepreneurial. At the heart of it for our agenda is the private sector. I think it plays a role in all of this. The private sector is a huge job creator. The private sector plays a role in de-risking economies. Any economy with a vibrant private sector provides some level of predictability as well. The private sector also, as we've discussed, can provide much needed financing for that. And the private sector, if it is responsible and sustainable, contributes to all the sustainable development goals. So there's many ways in which we see private sector needing to come to the table to help us get through the challenge of the 3 Cs: COVID, crisis, and conflict.
So talk to us more about UN Global Compact. Also through its local network in Indonesia and the work you do globally is the platform to catalyze business action and scale their ambition on sustainable development as we wind up 2022 and then we step into the new year. Which areas of focus do you think we should prioritize?
Right. So the UN Global Compact was set up just over 20 years ago, actually 22 now, by the then Secretary General Kofi Annan at that time. And it was really set up with the recognition that business was playing a much bigger role in societal transformation. So a compact was formed, an agreement between the UN and private sector. First of all, for private sector to be responsible and sustainable, but then also in the recent times contribute to the sustainable development goals. So we're a business membership organization. To date, we have just over 16,000 members from all around the world. We're present in about 160 countries. Then we have local chapters or local networks. We have about 60 of them. And Indonesia is one, a very vibrant and strong network of ours and growing with business membership. What do? We work along with the private sector, first of all, to raise ambition in many ways. Private sector should be responsible, they should be sustainable, they should contribute to the national agenda and work hand in hand with government. But also we look at ways in which the private sector can address some of the key issues. You talked about priorities. Yeah. At the moment, obviously, the climate crisis is one. Second is economic growth and generation. To what role can the private sector play around that? Third is inclusivity in many ways. Gender is one. Young people, getting economies that represent what countries and populations look like as a whole. So climate, economic growth and decent work, inclusivity, issues such as human rights and labor rights. And we also play a big role in anti-corruption and governance, just making sure that all business operations are respectful of governance.
Okay. Are you happy with some of the progress that's been achieved in those key areas of focus?
Well, sustainability or sustainable business is a journey. No one is perfect. You can always do more and do better. And as the world becomes more complex, issues like governance and anti-corruption also become more complex. As we know, the climate crisis is exacerbating. So there's always an opportunity to do more. I also think with 16,000 companies, that's a drop in the ocean. We have room to grow much larger, much stronger, and really build a global collective of private sector businesses that can make the change. So for us, I think the imperative is really how to go stronger, go bigger, move at the scale and the scope that we need for the transitions.